Testing, testing. Okay, now my microphone works. Oh, that was frustrating. Okay, microphone is working now. I can finally talk without everything being muted. Thank you. Okay. So, as I was saying a whole 10 minutes ago, good morning everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I do apologize for the sound issues earlier. Today's going to be a very easy day. Okay. And we still have our opportunity, even though on the 5 minute time frame we're no longer in the lower Bollinger. Um, Unfortunately, while I was, having sound issues, I did tell everybody to enter calls at that moment. What calls I took, again, are the TQQQ calls for next Friday. The reason why you want to take these calls is because very, very likely, and let's just pull up the daily time frame here. We're not going to be able to see that very well. Let's go to the 4 hour, okay. On the 4 hour time frame, I don't like showing that either. Let's go to the hourly. Basically, the day is going to be, are we going to be pushing to the 5 mile or are we going to be taking the upper Bollinger move? Now, in terms of the technicals, we have the 5 mile at the 722, which is right at that range I marked right in here. 724 would be the upper bounds of the 5 mile, 720 being the lower bounds. Or we're going to push into the upper Bollinger, which on the daily time frame, upper Bollinger is currently at the 734.76. Well, seeing how this morning we've already pushed up to the 731.63, the odds are extremely likely we try to form a cup to the upside here. Okay, now we did have this very nice inverse cup and handle forming here. I don't think that's going to completely take shape. One of the main reasons why is that we're still seeing buying within the HIG. Doesn't show it exactly within the 30-minute time frame, but we are still seeing quite a bit of buying within the HIG, and very likely we're going to be seeing HIG forming a cup here. Let's go ahead and check liquid. Kind of same thing with liquid here. Liquid already formed the cup, so very likely now forming a handle to continue pushing that upside. And I want to check the VVIX because again, VVIX, it's very, very important that we're still in this cautionary range, but we're still starting to pull downward. Okay, if we get below this 92 range, then that's telling us that the market is basically full on buying. Now, we're not at that range yet, and the other concern is that on the 5 minute time frame, since we are pushed into the lower Bollinger, that gives us the conditions to see the VVIX head upward a little bit towards the 20 mile. So we will be watching for that, but very, very likely the whole goal of the day for me is just, well, I mean, I already took my TQQQ calls, but it's just setting up calls for the next few days. Because I do think that the market wants this daily upper Bollinger. Sorry if it sounds like I'm shivering. It's like 60 degrees in my house right now. I really wish I had a heater. Um, the calls on TQQQ, you should be targeting anywhere between the 70 to 72 strike. I have the 71 strike going. So yeah, that's what we're looking for currently. Now, even on TQQQ, we do have to be cautious because this can be an inverse cut. With that potentially being an inverse cut, this can create the conditions to create a handle to the downside. So we just have to be very careful. We have to watch the upside credit, which is really watching the HIG, watching liquid, watching some of our more dealer heavy instruments. VVIX had a low of 92.33 today. Um, it was starting to pull back up again towards this 92.80, and now it's pulling back down again towards the 92.51. I'm gonna sound like I'm shivering this entire stream. I apologize. I'm just absolutely freezing. I have a sweater on, plus a blanket, plus a beanie. Now, even on the 1 minute and 5 minute time frame, we are starting to close an upward cup, which is highly, highly indicative of, upside movement. So, again, our upside target today is very, very, very large. Um, potentially we could be moving up a whole $4 to $5 today. If we're going to secure the upper Bollinger, then the daily level, let's make sure we mark it. So it's at the 734.77. So we're going to call that 735. So that's the range. Either we're going to start targeting that upper Bollinger, or we have a breakdown and retest of the 5 mile. However, we did retest the 5 mile, um, I believe yesterday, or no, on Monday. So technically, we don't need to have another 5 mile retest before we're, you know, good to go. Now on the call entries, even on the 1 minute time frame here, we have this very small cup forming. If this handle bounces here to the upside and doesn't invalidate this small cup, then this is going to be a super, super good call entry. Okay. Um, so we're just watching for that very closely. If it invalidates, however, then we will wait for the lower Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame for additional calls. But again, if we see the bounce occur here, it's going to be a very, very strong one. Literally need one more penny down to invalidate. Has to hit that 81. With the 1 minute time frame, you really want things hitting literally on the penny. Okay, so there's that downside. So cup invalidated. Well, that smaller cup anyway, which does create a bit of a double top here. Now with that double top, this can be the liquidity pushing us down with what we were discussing earlier. Well, I guess I was muted earlier with this inverse potentially cup and handle forming here. However, that's really not what I'm looking at. I am still looking at this as a cup to the upside because we have absolutely filled the liquidity for that. And at the top of a cup, we always look for bearish structure, which was why I was looking for that handle on that smaller cup. But this still qualifies as, that bearish structure on the top of a cup. And as long as we don't invalidate to the downside further, then a bounce from here would make this a valid cup and handle, very, very likely taking us to the upper Bollinger. So 5 minute time frame, let's go ahead and look for an entry. Now, if we have a bounce right here, then that would have been the entry. But if not, then ideally you're trying to look below this 728 range. You just have to be cautious because we do have a little bit of bearish structure here. But in terms of the overall day, I do believe that we will be attempting to, again, push for those highs. Now, we do have the HIG still pulling down slightly. We have to be very, very cautious of this. If this continues pulling down, this is telling us that, the equity upside is not strong. Um, so again, we just have to be very cautious of that. Same with liquid here. but liquid actually has been seeing a tiny bit of buying, which even a teeny bit of buying is something big when it dealing with very dealer heavy instruments like that. So DVIX pulling up slightly. So again, I'm kind of expecting it to have this 20 mod test and a rejection to the downside. Um, Very likely try to chop in this range to meet up with the 20 mod. So 20 mod currently at the 94.53. I expect that to be a lot closer to that 93 range by the time we test it and very likely have a rejection, but that's something we do have to contend with currently. And if that doesn't reject, if that pulls upward, then that will be showing that, dealers are hedging for the downside. Seeing a little bit of that bounce here. So again, if we see this cup fully take form, which it's literally about to any second here, we need the 729.66 to hit, so any second, and then it's going to blast off. And this blast off will take us all the way up to the 731.63 almost emphatically. That's for the 0 DTEs, but the true target here, again, is this upper Bollinger on the daily time frame. Because that's what the dealers want here. Um, there's either the dealers either want the 5 mod or they want this upper Bollinger. There's really not a lot of room to sit here and chop in between this range. Um, Usually, if we do see the chop between these ranges, where, for example, today, by close, if we see the upper Bollinger rejected and the 5 mod rejected, that actually creates bearish conditions, even though this overall looks very, very bullish. Um, Generally, you start seeing a lot of upper Bollinger rejections prior to a major sell-off. I'm not expecting that. I'm fully expecting the market to pretty much blast off here. We should be seeing well above the 735 today, if we're going to get the type of day that I'm assuming we're going to be getting. Now, looking at the HIG, we are starting to see some buying within the HIG, so we are going to be looking for that cup to be closing all the way back up to the 80.33. And this is, a big reason why I'm not touching any of the short positions yet. There's really not room to do so right now. Um, if we continue seeing, this bullish structure forming, then that's telling us that, we're going to have a major leg upward. BVIX as well. Um, this is one time frame, a little misleading, but BVIX as well had that very, very slight bit of buying, but now starting to sell again. The 1 minute time frame. So with this cup being formed here, we now have the ability to start building bearish structure in here. Let me go ahead and delete some of these drawings so it's not such a mess. But build bearish structure in here to pull downward, form a handle. Very, very likely coming down towards, let's see where the 5 minute, yeah, probably towards that 728, 95 range. From that range, we should get a 20 mile rejection to the upside, which again would very, very likely take us all the way back up towards that 731.63. So lots of very bullish structure here on the day. I would not be shorting this yet. I think that is kind of just asking to, potentially burn a lot of money because our upside is very, very huge. Yeah, I can look at SanDisk. SanDisk, okay. Look at the daily time frame. These are notes from last week or Monday, I don't remember. That's from last week. Okay. So for SanDisk here, we have 2 weeks of being within the upper Bollinger, which means that technically we should be seeing a higher high into downward consolidation. Now that downward consolidation on the weekly time frame should pull us towards the 5 mile. Now, obviously the 5 mile is extremely far away from us currently. On the daily time frame, we do have a little bit of similar conditions here. Now, I do want to look at the hourly for a moment because I need to see if we had a 5 mile test. It looks like we had a 5 mile test on 4:30, which if that's the case, then we should be starting to look towards a 5 mile consolidation here. Even on the daily time frame. Reason why? You have an extended upper Bollinger push here. So this is actually the day 3 upper Bollinger. Day 3 upper Bollinger works a lot like the day 2. So day 2 you expect a higher high into downward consolidation. If you don't get that downward consolidation by the end of day 2, generally that day 3 will be acting as that day 2 where you then see an additional higher high into that downward consolidation. 5 mile is currently at the 1265. So with us being at 1380, that's still telling us that potentially over the next 2 sessions, we could be seeing, maybe about a 60 to $80 downside. Okay, because again, the 5 mile is going to be pulling up very quickly each session this goes on. So let's say we close today at the 1360. Okay, that means that tomorrow the 5 mile would probably be around that 1310 range, which means that the downside test would at that point only be another $50. Okay, so don't get too bearish on this, but there is the conditions for a downside test um specifically for that 5 mile. SPY here, we're seeing our breakout as we anticipated. You get rich, make sure you remember me. Um, but besides that, our upper Bollinger move is looking very good. Um, let's check TQQ. Our calls are not in the money yet, but they're very, very likely going to be running pretty well in the money very soon here. Now, I do want to look at VVIX again. Still chopping in this range. So that's not exactly a good or bad signal. Just remember every single penny of upside that the VVIX gets means that someone with big money went out and bought a futures contract for this. And they would generally only do that if they're seeing major downside. Um, Today so far we've seen the VVIX go all the way from the 96 down towards the 92.33. So we will be watching for that. I am expecting it to pull below this 92 today. So yeah, that's what we're expecting. Now, semiconductors here, having a little bit of bearishness. Do have this inverse cup and handle forming. And not only is an inverse cup and handle, it is a head and shoulders. So potentially, semiconductors can be trying to take us down a bit on the day. Um, Obviously, if semiconductors head downward, that's going to pull down, the SPY price along with it. So we will be targeting that. See where the bottom of this cup is right here. Bottom of this cup is at the 494.88. So we'll just keep an eye on semiconductors, make sure that we don't get trapped due to them. QQQ here, on the other hand, looking very strong. We do have, um, so far it's not a full rejection of this Head and Shoulders, because again, we do have some of the liquidity for it, even if the shoulder line or the neckline might be a little wonky. So we will be watching for that Head and Shoulders, but we also have this very nice cup and potential handle forming as well, which if that forms, if that completes, that's going to, you know, basically blow off the shoulder. And then we can fully look to the upside. Nvidia here pushing upward very well, which to me that looks like they're trying to reclaim this cup towards the 211. So we will be watching Nvidia closely, but to me it looks like they want to head upwards towards that 211. Now on the 5-minute time frame, with Nvidia being pushed into the upper Bollinger, that does create the conditions for a potential pull down. So again, we're just going to be watching SPY and everything very closely because we don't want to get trapped with semiconductors pulling down on us when a lot of tech looks bullish. So this cup has totally completed. Now on the 5-minute time frame on semiconductors, um, even though we are pushing down, this does create bullish conditions to buy calls to the upside. So I actually want to take some SOX S shorts, I think. And look at the prices on them. Now the reason why I'm taking SOX S shorts or puts, because that's basically like taking a semiconductor call. And for this, I would just target the $10 put for next week. And I got a purchase at the 0.51. Okay, so I got a couple of the stocks as puts, $10 puts for next week. Go ahead and post that in chat. Okay, so let's go circle around back to volatility. Let's circle back to SPY and everything else. Volatility kind of just still holding its place. SPY here. This cup and handle is still playing out. As long as we have the bounce from this range right here, then this will be a proper cup and handle. Um, we are looking just in case it decides to invalidate. So that downside to the, let's see, the 728.33 would invalidate this cup and handle. But so far, does not look to be the case at all. It looks very good for us. And I also want to look at the HIG and everything again, just to make sure. Yep, HIG's still buying. Um, Starting to look like they want to form that cup to the upside. Liquid being slow, but still buying. VVIX, we need to see a move downward already. So I am expecting a fairly large pull downward within the VVIX. So again, just everything we need to be cautious for. Now oil starting to look a little bullish today. Um, Even though obviously there is a lot of bearish conditions within oil, but this is starting to form a little bit of a cup and handle to the upside. So if that completes, and if that, really takes form, then that's going to pull oil back to the 140. Pulling back to the 140 will pull some weight against the overall equity market. So it's something we have to be cautious of. But overall, I really am seeing the bullish structure on the day. It looks very good. The oil main is looking pretty okay to me as well. Let's see, I'll make sure. Okay, so this does look like a very large inverse cup that is closed on oil, which that's a good thing. That's, obviously creating bearish structure. But from that, that means that very likely we get a small handle prior to the full pull down. Okay, so we do have that weighing against us slightly as well. Now, SPY here looking like it's getting ready to break out into the 730, which that's going to take us back up to that 731. That's what I was saying today. Very easy day overall. Was just pretty much primarily taking those early calls, which I do apologize that my microphone was having some issues earlier, but hopefully um I was able to convey that everybody should be trying to target those TQQQ calls for the upside. Um, Not seeing invalidation of this bullish cup right there at all. So I do want to delete that handle on the inverse cup, and very likely we should see our 71 plus by the end of the day. Yeah, market's looking very good. Now, Bitcoin has been selling off slightly, which I don't care about Bitcoin a whole lot right now, but I do care about it because it's super, super, super institutionally controlled, or owned, which means that price action within Bitcoin usually tends to reflect what the market is trying to do with equities. So if we see Bitcoin continue selling off throughout the day, that can, allude to that potentially we could be seeing some selling throughout equities. It's not always a one-to-one correlation, but it does hold some weight. So obviously just be cautious of that. Want to circle back to the HIG though. We're still seeing buying in the HIG. Um, as long as we're seeing buying in the HIG, we really shouldn't be worrying about downside. No dealers in their right mind are going to be buying the HIG and liquid if they're expecting a sell-off. So, um, hold on, I want to check UDN. So my UDN position is finally starting to take some weight, so that's good. Yeah, I think today looks super super bullish. The only thing that is somewhat bearish here is semiconductors. Um, we did have this very large head and shoulders basically complete. Um, which means that if the dealers are truly wanting some major downside today, that they are going to try to target this liquidity. Grab that candle correctly. But even then, that's only $4 downside on semiconductors. Um, while the upside is, a whole $15 roughly. So I say that because, the upper Bollinger push and everything. So I do think the dealers were trying to shake out a lot of the calls earlier by showing a lot of this bearish structure. Um, but we're just not seeing that bearishness reflected within our larger instruments. We're still seeing the VVIX pull downward. We're still seeing our high yield corporate credits and everything still pulling upward. So from the dealer standpoint, I'm not seeing dealer selling. I'm seeing dealer buying, which means that any of the earlier selling was either retail or just, you know, trapping people, unfortunately. Now, my drip calls are almost back in the money or back into profit. So I currently have 82 of them. Um, my average on them is 0.33. They were at 0.12 yesterday. Now they're at 0.27.5. So finally regaining my weight on that, and I am actually green on the actual drip shares. So that position is now turning, very, very nicely. And it's just started to, for those people that don't really know what I'm looking for out of drip. The whole point of me being in drip right now is because we're basically targeting back to when oil prices were normal. Okay. Well, what happens to drip when oil prices are normal? It sits in a pretty dang good range, right? So that's what I like. I like pretty dang good ranges. So um that's what we're looking for. Simply just looking for oil to return to normal, and with that being able to profit immensely off of that. So I like drip a lot. Um can be seeing a pretty massive upside to drip too, especially because if you remember, there was oil volatility back during this period. I forgot when it was that we struck Iran. I want to say it was in May, but prior to that, um, hold on, let me get my time frames right before I start talking a bunch of nonsense here. Okay, so it was in June. Okay, so right there. So what was happening in USO when it decided to go to 17? Let's check that. That happened on 3/26 of 2025. Basically, oil just pulled down to $60 a barrel. But that's kind of the range that I'm looking for. Is that we're just looking for oil to pull back to normality and, being able to profit immensely off of that. So, big reason why I like taking the drip shares is because we can sell CCs on them and everything once we start getting in this range to be able to, massively, massively profit off of them. Almost to the point where we can hold this as a long, even though you don't want to hold it forever, but it's enough to where we could be selling CCs over the next, 2, 3, 4 quarters, making tons of profit. So I like it a lot. And to me, that's why I like buying this, um, compared to just, taking puts on like USO and stuff. Semiconductors still pushing down slightly. So we did talk about that 482.28 range, but at the same time, we're seeing SPY continuing upward, which really does make me think that semiconductors will be, um, bought up during this moment. It's very likely they're doing another 5 mile test because it has been 5 days since the last semiconductor 5 mile test. So very likely 5 mile test into the upper Bollinger push. So and let's look at the VVIX. Still pushing downward at the 92.45. Now I am bullish on TLT again, so I did post this morning to start looking at those 92 calls for December. Um, when oil volatility is pulling down, when we have, oh, jeez. You could tell I trade TLT a lot because I'm always marking on it. Um, let's just ignore all that. Anyway, when TLT, uh, let me step back. Oil volatility weighs against the treasuries. It obviously pulls the treasury yields higher because it introduces very short-term inflation into the economy slash market. Now, with that said, when oil volatility starts to drop back to normal, so when we see the oil prices starting to head back to the normal ranges, treasuries usually do very well. You usually see the treasury yields absolutely drop. Usually see a lot of buying within the long end. Excuse me just 1 second. Now, with that, we also have the Bank of Japan needing to intervene on their currency. Sorry, I can't talk too well right now. I was really sick last night, so my stomach's hurting really bad. Um, so it feels like someone punched me in the gut. But besides that, the Bank of Japan needs to intervene on the yen fairly soon here. Um, they were doing so prior to the war starting. Um, it was this spike right here, and I wish I could ignore all the drawings, but sit within this red box right here. Bank of Japan started to intervene and buy the yen back upward. Um, that took the price from, it was 86 at the time, the dividends weigh against the price, but it took it from 86 all the way to 91. Um, when we had the yen intervention in 2024, I was able to ride TLT positions from, I want to say it was 88 all the way up to 100. Um, so when the Bank of Japan intervenes in the yen, they buy a lot of US treasuries and especially the long end. Um, so I am targeting that upside. And with the calls being at 92, that would just simply fill up this larger cup on the daily time frame. Um, and push us into the money a few dollars. So I like those contracts a lot and they're really not that expensive. Look at the SPY and everything just because semiconductors are seeing a little bit of downside. But it does look like SPY wants to give us the price action we're looking for today. Um, oh yeah, even our VVIX is pulling downward further. So this is telling us, almost verbatim that dealers are specifically not hedging the downside. And if they're not hedging the downside, that means their machines will be buying to the upside. So it's looking very bullish on the day. I would not get thrown off by semiconductors, and if anything, it actually creates a really nice position to take calls into semiconductors. Which for me, I'm using the SOXS puts to do so. That's shorting the bear ETF of semiconductors, which is essentially just taking a call to the upside. Yeah, hit that level and looking like a bounce so far. And I do want to look at the daily time frame. Where is the 5 mile here? 5 miles at the 472.23 upper Bollinger 98. Oh yeah, today should be upper Bollinger day one. Um, yeah, I'm not worried about that. This is going to be a upper Bollinger push. So, um, this is just farming liquidity from people. So I definitely like those success puts a lot. I think there's a ton of room on the downside here for success anyway. And again, that's basically taking calls to the upside. So, success puts we're gonna take a couple of those. Something just hit. Okay, and I'm sitting in my success puts. My average on those are currently at 0.48. So I look forward to seeing you all on the upside. Should be a very nice day for everybody. Now, I'm gonna bear it back a few minutes just because I feel super, super nauseous. Again, I've sick pretty much all night last night. So, um, I might be AFK like 5 minutes or so. But I want to circle this back to the VVIX because I know that not everyone has the live futures reading of it, but that way we can all watch this. And I'm gonna make a little note. I can find them anyway. It's what, 10, 27? So let's say, okay. So I'll be right back in a few minutes, everybody. If anybody has any questions in chat, feel free to ask, and I will be more than happy to respond once I am back. So I'll be right back, everybody. Alright, everybody, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, let's go ahead and check everything. My success puts are up now, which is awesome. Actually up very, very nicely. And SPY giving us our price action. So everybody should be having a very, very, very nice day so far. Um, I do apologize that my mic was muted earlier, but we should still all be up in our positions. I'm doing very well with everything pretty much that I've entered today. Just kind of waiting for it to play out at this point. Not too worried about whether we get the upper Bollinger push or not because Spy's telling us that it wants this upper Bollinger. Now, there is going to be another entry on calls today so that everybody is aware. Because once we do hit this 731.63, what will happen very likely is we're going to build some bearish structure. From that bearish structure, form a handle, and very likely off to the races. So if you didn't take calls at the very bottom today, that's okay. It happens. Wait for this cup to finish out. Wait for the handle. And towards the bottom of that handle, we'll start looking at the HIG, liquid, the VBIX, and start really piecing together whether, that handle's going to fully pull us downward or if we're truly going to see the breakout, which, spoiler alert, I do think we get the breakout. Um, so that's going to be the next entry on calls. Until then, you just pretty much wait for the price action. Now with this 5 minute time frame giving us the upper Bollinger, once we hit the top of this cup, you can short it. Okay, so if you want a very short term put, you take it at the very top of this cup to the 20 ma. The 20 ma is currently at the 729.37. They'll very likely be around the 729.60-ish range. So there's going to be a whole roughly $2 of downside within a put to take. So if you missed the earlier calls, that would be the put opportunity. Now it's like 60 degrees in my room, so I apologize if I sound like I'm freezing right now. I might actually just be partially freezing right now. So BVIX still pulling down, but again, every single penny of upside in BVIX means that someone with big money went and bought a contract to hedge the downside. So be very cautious when we see this moving up even just a couple cents here. Semiconductors absolutely blasting off like we expected. I want to go check my puts because they should be up. Yeah, my puts are up 10% on success, so that's very nice. And, those have just gotten started basically because our upside from here, we're truly targeting all the way back up towards the high of the day. So, we have a long ways to go. Remember, don't short this until this cup completes and that we start seeing bearish structure. But there will be that shorting opportunity there. And short down all the way to the 20 ma. Actually, something I think I want to do as well. So now I do have to leave in about hour and a half. Um, but I will be here in the meantime, just trade alongside everybody else. So if you have any questions or anything while we're going through all this, then feel free to ask. But so far, we're just waiting for price action to hit. Is my sound not working again? Can you all still hear me? Okay. Okay, great. So how's everybody's day going? Um, it's not a lot to talk about right now because I kind of data dumped everybody really early on, and unfortunately my mic was muted through half of it, so I do apologize, but I think we all understand the sentiment of the day and understand kind of what we're looking for here. Now that we're getting to the top of this cup, I'm going to be looking to enter short positions. So I am setting up some orders. And again, I'm targeting the 729. Okay, so 729 puts are the ideal puts you want here. Um, we're not expecting huge downside. Okay. Again, we're literally only expecting about $2 of downside into a major bounce to the upside. Okay, this is just liquidity, so don't overthink that. Um, but make sure you exit those puts second we do hit the 20 mile today. I need to share this link. Okay, so with this cup top being hit, we're now looking for bearish structure. I do have some put orders set up, so those should be hitting literally any second here. Um, okay, they did hit. Now, we are expecting a very, very slight push upward within the VVIX here. Now, very likely this is going to be that range that I talked about where we see that 20 mile retest or we see it reject further downward. So 20 mile currently at the 93.22. So we are looking for the VVIX currently to push up towards that 93 range for these very, very short term short positions. Okay. Um, what else do I want to look at? To look at the HIG, which as you can see, they are still buying. Um, with the 5 minute time frame being in the upper Bollinger, you could have that slight chop towards the middle Bollinger before fully finishing this cup to the upside. Anna, if you're listening to this stream right now, please do not sell your Micron. I don't think she's watching the stream though, but we'll see. Our Soxus puts kicking butt still. And I do want to watch the 1 minute time frame here just for a moment, just because I am looking for bearish structure at the top of this cup. because again, for these SPY puts, I want them very, very, very short term. I'm just targeting the middle Bollinger on the 5 minute time frame, which again is at the 729.73. So we're looking for about $2 of downside here. Now my Soxus puts are up a whole 28%, so those are starting to do very, very well. My TQQ calls are doing very good. Let's see if those are not in the money yet, but they're heading there. Should be in the money by the end of the day. So yeah, everything's looking very fine so far. You're very welcome, everybody. Oh, also, good news. I'm going to be streaming tomorrow. So the stream schedule, and I want to just write this out on screen here. Let's do it like that. So from now on, I'm going to be streaming Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Um, I was going to originally stream the Wednesday morning sessions as well, but just due to my wife's schedule and that's kind of like one of the only times we can hang out besides on Saturdays. So, the Wednesdays I'm going to be not streaming, but the schedule from this point forward will be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So, I will be streaming tomorrow as well. I haven't been streaming each and every day, especially over the last month. Last month was a mess. I broke my arm. I also was in the hospital for a week, so I didn't get to stream a whole lot during April. But this is something I'm wanting to do pretty much full time. Um, at least these morning streams, and then I will be doing teaching streams, actual classes, which I'm writing a curriculum for. Those will be on. So let me just write this out. I'll write classes stay. And those will be at, I have to remember the Eastern time frame. Now, with the classes, um, they will be for the basic subscribers. Um, and these won't be started for at least another few weeks because again, I am writing a full curriculum. I do have most of it written, I just haven't pieced it together. What month is it? It's May, probably early June. But that will be for the subscribers. Um, but even if you can't attend those live, and if you do have the subscription, they will be saved in a specific VOD channel. Um, and those will be again, categorized and everything so that you can watch them later and actually watch a class rather than a stream. So thank you. Yeah, and the worst part about the Weeble too is that I used to post on Weeble a ton more than what I do now. It's just that the Weeble censoring has gotten extremely. Thank you. Sorry, my wife brought me coffee and everything, so I've been looking forward to it. Um, so with Webull, my account is pretty much shadow banned, so like 90% of my posts don't even get shown anymore unless you specifically look into my portfolio or like look into the account and actually look up my posts. It's been a huge issue that I've been dealing with the last, year and a half. Um, but I used to post pretty much everything on there. I used to discuss, very, very specific market mechanics. I used to discuss, whole 9 yards. I would type almost 3,000 words a day to Weeble, but they have made that impossible. Now again, 5 minute time frame here. We're just looking for this weakening towards the 20 mile. We are starting to see a little bit of bearish structure within the 1 minute time frame. Nothing too much yet, but we do have a slight head and shoulders forming. So we will be looking for that to take us down to this 20 mile range. And I want to look at the VVIX. Okay, it is seeing a little bit of buying, so this is kind of what we were expecting to have that meet up towards that 20 mile, meet the 20 mile on the 5 minute time frame into a fairly large rejection to the downside. So that should give us our move on the SPY for the slight short downside, um, and also give us the opportunity for those who didn't take calls to be able to buy calls in that range. So it's kind of the exit the put range and enter new call range. So now I do want to look at the HIG. Excuse me, I don't mean to yawn in the mic. HIG. The HIG is still buying, so this is going to be forming that cup to the upside today. Um, Again, with this being on the 5 minute upper Bollinger, we are expecting this slight pull downward. It's only going to pull down a few cents, okay? But that's enough for the movement to give us the move that we're looking for in SPY and everything. So I'm only expecting the HIG to pull down like 3 cents, but it's going to be important that that happens because, again, this is very algorithmic trading. From that pull down, you should get a rejection up to the upside. So um, that should give us that handle on the cup that we're looking for on SPY to exit those short positions and enter new calls to the upside. 1 minute time frame here, still giving us bearish structure, but we do need to get our move down. Let's check the VIX. So VVIX at the 92.24, it did pull up to the 92.30. So dealers are still very hesitant on this pull downward. So just be cautious of that. This might just be the type of day where we don't see that handle on the cup and they just decide to continue heading up the entire day. But um, very likely we should see the handle. Now this can still be building bearish structure even though it seems like a breakout. This can now be giving us much deeper head and shoulders. So again, we're still looking for this bearish structure up here. Okay, we're not exiting puts yet. We're not doing anything crazy. We're simply looking for the top of this cup to fill out, give us a handle to the downside. From that downside handle, we look for the upper Bollinger. So not shaking out of my puts yet or anything else. VVIX is at the 92.20. So that is indicative of buying. We should see that 92 range fully taken out today, but it would be nice if they give us our pull down on this handle. Still fully am expecting it, but they are making that a little difficult. Let's check the VVIX again. 92.17, so again, still pulling down, so we have to be very, 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 very cautious. Same with the HIG, it's not pulling down, it's continuing to buy here. So dealers are saying that they do want the upside. Still looking for the bearish structure though, even though they are pushing up against it. But at the top of every single cup, I always look for bearish structure. Especially since we hit the high of the morning. Um, Not too concerned about them not giving us that bearish structure. Semiconductors, ever since we bought the bottom, is up a whole $10. So as I was saying, we had basically like a whole $15+ of upside when we entered those positions. So everybody should be kicking some major butt on those. And I do believe our success puts are actually gonna run in the money, um, by the end of the day. So that's very awesome for us. Huge win. Along with the spy calls and everything. Today's been a very good day. Monday was a really good day too. Um, Monday we turned $544 into almost 4,200. And it was a very, very difficult trading session. Um, the reason why I bring that up is not to like I'm not saying that from like an egotistical point of view, but just from as a trader, that's probably one of the most studied days I'll do. Um, that VOD is something I've watched already 2 times before. Um, just because it was such a difficult trading day that we nailed to the absolute T. Sorry, I'm just checking some positions really quick. Those stocks puts are up a whole 40% currently, so that's awesome. Still waiting on the SPY puts to do their thing. We do need some bear structure forming here. VVIX is ticking upward very, very slightly. It did pull down to the 92.17, back up to the 92.24. Again, every single penny this moves upward is very, very crucial. The VOD for Monday, so let me link that in chat really quick. Hold on. Alright, so that's the stream for Monday. Um, I don't even think it was that long of a stream either, but Probably one of the best VODs you could watch in terms of positioning on a day that looks completely against what actually happened for the price action. Um, very, very, very good day. Now I'm still holding my SPY puts here. Not too worried about them because overall I've been having a super, super good day with the calls. So even if I had to take 100% loss on these SPY puts here, I'm going to do that. But with the top of this cup being closed here, I do short the top of cups. That's just how I trade. So I will be looking for this downside. EVIX at the 92.20. So again, not really giving us much signal that the downside is even going to come in. Now, I want to look at the HIG because very likely. Oh, so the HIG did have a little bit of a pull down. Okay, so this can be indicative of us seeing that pull down coming within SPY. So we will be watching for that. Meanwhile, SPY is just continuing to break upward. Yeah, you're very welcome. Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see this in chat. I can go over the VIX. So there's two main things that people look for in the VIX. Okay, we actually did just see a tick upward, so that could be telling us that we could get that selling in SPY. There's two different symbols in VIX. Okay, there's the actual VIX, which this tracks the S&P 500 and the contracts on it. So what it is tracking is the call and put contracts taken against the S&P. Um, this is a great tool, but it can be a little bit misleading because this does pick up a lot of the retail action and smaller funds. Because anybody can pretty much go buy a put or a call on the SPACs, and that will weigh against or pull upward into the VIX itself. Now, the VVIX, which is the one that I primarily use, is a much different instrument. It's tracking the actual futures pricing on the insurance for the VIX um, derivatives. So what that means is that basically only big money is going to be buying into this type of fund. Um, when big money is buying into this fund, that means that they are buying puts on the overall market. They're buying puts on the SPACs. They're expecting downward weight to occur because there would be no reason to buy into this just to hedge positions. This is only bought into as a form of insurance rather than a hedge like a VIX call would do. Usually you would get like VIX calls to hedge volatility on your equity positions. Well, VVIX works a little bit differently because it is a futures contract. It basically works almost exactly like insurance. So usually only big money is buying into this. Usually only big money um are going to be the ones to move this. So when we do see this moving upward, it's telling us a huge story. It's telling us that very, very big dealers or big positions are purchasing hedge the downside. Unlike the actual VIX, where it can move upward when we're technically having a bullish day. Um, it just depends on how many people are buying puts or not. So that's the distinction that I have for those. But I do track the VIX as well because for me this is more of an indicator if the market is bullish or bearish. So if we're above this $20 range, then usually that's telling me that there's bearish conditions within the market. if we're below that $20 range, then usually the market's going to be overall bullish. So the actual VIX, more of an indicator for overall price action, where the VVIX is pretty much like hyper tuned for very, very, very specific price action. So hopefully that makes sense. No, I am still just keeping my puts open here. Again, I really don't care if they burn because here's the thing, right? If you have calls from earlier and if you did take puts at this position, either they're going to just push the upper Bollinger and burn these puts, and at that point, like our calls are just going to be up like 600, 700%, something like that. So who cares about those puts at that point, right? Or we're actually going to get the price action we're going to expect. Those puts will hit, and then we'll, finish buying additional calls to the upside. So I'm not worried about the puts. I'm not intending to exit them currently. Yeah, you're very welcome. And I hate to shamelessly like plug this, but my channel is really small. So if you do know of any other traders who do actively day trade, who do enjoy um, learning from someone who does this as their full-time career, then I would love if you could share my channel. Um, but that's enough of a plug for from me today. We're seeing this cup and handle on QQQ play out super well, which has invalidated this head and shoulders. Now with QQQ and SPY, so a little bit of a divergence here in terms of being able to short that cup top. Okay, because on QQQ, yes, we've completed a cup here, but we don't really have a really defined short entry yet. Hold on one second. Sorry for that. Anyway, we don't really have a super defined short entry here, and the reason why is because on the 5-minute time frame, we haven't pushed into the upper Bollinger yet. So that's telling us on SPY that there's still more upside before dealers really aim to take that downside push that I'm expecting, um, in the form of that handle to the downside. Semiconductors, we're seeing pretty much everything we need to see out of them. Forming very, very good structure. Very likely going to take us all the way back up to the high of the day. NVIDIA doing the video things. Working on invalidating this larger head and shoulders, which for NVIDIA, that's really good. Because that's telling us that NVIDIA very, very likely does want towards that 211 range very soon. Which that's very great for all of our call positions. Semiconductors still just kicking butt. Seeing a little bit of a pullback from SPY. I want the 1-minute time frame. Again, we're just looking for bearish structure here to form on the top of this cup. Nothing really too great here. But from this short at the top of the cup, we're simply just looking for the 20 mile. 20 mile has been pulling up the entire time, so even if you have to exit and that put doesn't give you a whole ton of weight, don't worry about that today. Just use the 20 mile to exit. The 20 mile on the 5-minute time frame is at the 7:30:45, so that will be what we're looking for our exit. And also what we're looking for to take any further calls to the upside if you haven't had the opportunity to take calls or anything. So That's what we're looking for now. VVIX still pulling upwards slightly. I do want to see, you know, a few cents up, you know, a pretty decent move to the upside here for VVIX. I want dealers telling us that they are hedging for that handle on that cup. The Soxus puts are still doing super, super good. Drip should be fine. Drip's something we're not going to touch for a very long time. Um, I don't know if I got to discuss this when my mic was muted or not, but basically for drip, all we're trying to do is target the oil levels back to when they were standard. Okay. Um, this is where drip trades when oil is at the standard prices, and that's anywhere between basically the 765 all the way up to the $17 range. Okay. Um, we bought this sucker at the low. We were buying right there and throughout all this structure. Okay. Big deal if you bought the top of that, whatever. Um, we're looking for oil prices to normalize again. Okay. Um, Once oil prices normalize, we'll be well into that $7, $8 plus range. Um, the reason why I have both calls and shares is because I want to get the derivative weight from the calls, but from the shares, I also want to be able to sell covered calls when the time comes. So once we start getting to this, 7, 8, 9, $10 range, you can start really safely selling calls on your current shares because either those calls are going to be exercised and you're going to get paid, you know, that $10, $11 a share, or you're just going to sell CCs and those CCs will burn, which that's good for you as the seller, because that just means that you get to keep your shares while pocketing the CC cash. So overall, drips should be something that should be massively, massively, massively profitable for um pretty much all position or all portfolio sizes. I mean, taking even the most basic position in this, you should really try to take those 100 shares so that you can sell that CC. Um, Granted, I know not every single portfolio can afford that, but it's only going to be about 450 bucks, and the upside from this is, you know, basically going to be about 450 bucks plus selling a CC on it. So, um, I think the risk to reward here is just absolutely insane. And it's a very reasonable entry, for, it doesn't matter what size your portfolio is. Now, SPY is starting to give us our downside, so we will watch for that, but I want to show something on USO. And this is kind of correlating to drip, but this is back what oil usually trades at. Usually oil is trading at between 60 to $70 a barrel. Okay. Um, all we're looking for is normality here. Um, when we talk about the conflict in the Middle East, all that's happened is temporary, gosh, I can't remember the wording. Temporary supply chain disruptions. It's not like people are physically struggling to get oil right now. It's just there's a disruption within the supply chain. So oil will normalize. It will normalize very quickly as well. Um, so this position should really start paying us out in the next month, 2 months. Now, I want to look at the SPY so I make sure that I'm not missing my exit. Again, we're looking for the 5-minute 20 mile, which is at 7:30:58. That will be when we exit our puts, start looking for bearish structure to head up to the upside. I'm gonna go AFK just for a few minutes just because I feel super nauseous again. I apologize. I'm on a new medication that causes me super severe nausea, even with this anti-nausea medication I'm taking. So, um, yeah, just give me a few minutes, everybody. I'll be right back. If you do have any questions, ask in chat and I'll answer them all when I'm back. Even the CC question, I see it, so I'll answer it when I'm back. All right, I'm back, everybody. Um, Hopefully that makes sense what I typed in chat there about the selling the calls. But you have to have a minimum of 100 shares, okay? Because again, every option is bundled up based on 100 shares. Now, we may not get our downside here on SPY because this is starting to look like a cup is forming here. So if we don't get our downside, then we will need to get ready to start closing these puts. It's not something I'm really worried about until we really push well above this level. Basically the 732.70-ish range. That's going to be when, or let's just call it 733. We get to 733, just go ahead and exit those puts, take the loss, um, and let's just continue riding those calls to the upside. But even with cup topping being completed, again, I'm always going to short that. Um, doesn't always work out, but that's still the position we have to take because even on the 5 minute time frame, ignoring, this being a cup or anything else, we always short the upper Bollinger into the 20 mile. We always go long from the lower Bollinger to the 20 mile. So our short position is still active. Even if it's being chopped a little bit. This was still when the short entry was to be engaged upon anyway. So still holding those short positions, not worried about them. Either they're going to land or we're going to cut them out and continue writing the calls to the upside. So um, yeah, that's what we're waiting for. Now VVIX pushing down very, very low. Very exciting. We haven't seen below the 92 range in quite a long time. Um, this is very bullish. Okay. Now, I am still expecting, again, the top of that cup to give us that handle, but we just have to be very cautious because, I mean, the VVIX is telling us right now that dealers have zero interest in even looking at the downside. We see on semiconductors that um, we bought the absolute bottom, which I'm super proud of. I'm sorry, we nailed that. Um, and now we can fully look to closing the entire gap of the day. Now on semiconductors here, something interesting is with this cup forming, we should be expecting a small handle to the downside, so that might coincide with SPY giving us that downside handle. Okay, so we will be looking for that out of semiconductors. And out of QQQ, we have still not seen that upper Bollinger push into the 5 minute time frame. Um, Ideally, I would like to see QQQ push that upper Bollinger to give, that short position there, but that has not been the case so far. So my Bollinger settings are always 20 and 2. Um, the length, so it's very misleading that they call this the length, because what the length is actually tracking is how many days, and technically it's tracking the 20 ma. So this is the daily 20 ma that we track. The reason why we track the daily 20 ma is because that is the most central position between the top and the bottom of the market. Now the width we set to 2. Now I forgot the exact percentage, but basically this is based on a percentage move above the top or bottom of the market. Sorry if you can hear my daughter. Um, but this is basically, I believe, around a 97% um move above, where the above that 20 mod range. So this is very, very accurate in terms of hitting tops or bottoms. The length, again, you always want it on the 20 mAh. The 20 mAh is basically a level that's tested once a month, so that's going to give you that most neutral reading. Um, if you want less volatility in your Bollingers, you set the length to 1. If you want more volatility in your Bollingers, you set the length to 3. Having it set to 2 makes it, for me, be a very, very accurate reading. Oh, for socks, we should be heading up. I mean, we're gonna be going all the way to like the 510, 515. Um, this is day one upper Bollinger. The upper Bollinger's at 501.42. That means tomorrow we're expecting a higher high. Um, we got a lot of room. I'm very stoked that we nailed this position here because the upside here is just abysmal. Our TQQQ calls almost in the money. Will be in the money very, very soon here. Yeah, we should be super happy about those Sox S puts. I mean, they have a ton of room to run. Um, on Sox S, let's see. We should be hitting well below that $9 range. Um, the high of the day was the 975. Assuming, with Sox anyway, that was basically that 507 range. Well, we're expecting like down here. So we got a ton of room. These should run well in the money. They might run a whole, uh, dollar or two in the money. So very, very, very quality trade. Now, VVIX, also, if anyone took those silver positions I posted in chat earlier, then you would be up a boatload. You'd be up absolute ton right now, let me tell you. Um, because I posted those this morning, before the market was even open. So even if you bought those right at the market open, you'd be up almost a whole dollar right now, which for silver, that's a ton within the contract. What was I talking about? VVIX. We are seeing a slight tick upward in the VVIX, so this can coincide with us getting our handle on SPY. But again, we just kind of need to wait for it to finish building out. Drip's still doing very well. And even with drip being up 11% right now, I know some people have that concern of, oh, I missed the boat. Um, you haven't missed the boat. I was originally buying drip when we get off the minute time frame, but I was originally buying drip when, it was back in the 480 range. Okay. Currently my average is basically at 4.4, little in between there. Um, so don't hesitate and assume that you're late to the party. Um, we have a whole 100% plus to move on this ETF to the upside. Um, don't really worry too much if you're, having to pay an additional 25 cents a share or something like that. Now, I am going to go ahead and end the stream soon because my daughter has an appointment, which I have to drive a lot farther than what I originally thought. I thought I was only going to be like a 30-minute drive, but it's actually going to be a lot closer to a 50-minute drive. So, um, if there is any final questions, right now is a super, super, super ideal time. If not, then I will talk to you all in tomorrow morning's stream. What drip calls on my end? So I'm currently in the June, I think it's June 18th or 19th, 5 calls, and I'm also in the December 5 calls as well. Okay, this gives us, plenty, plenty, plenty of time to really just soak up a ton of premium on those positions. Because again, the thing with drip is that, well, let me step back. The thing with oil is that when oil volatility decides to drop, it drops very, very hard. It creates a deflationary cycle, and that deflationary cycle can actually lead to a major breakout within drip. Um, potentially we could be seeing this 12, 11, or 12, 13, 14 plus range. So for me, this is a super, super, super ideal play to trade into. Originally I was using SCO, which is also kind of the same type of fund. Um, it's just more expensive and it has a higher decay on it, which when we're trying to target the upside, we don't want to fight decay. Um, we want our positions to be nice and healthy. Drip has decay to it, just like every single fund does, but not nearly as much. So for me, um, this really allows us to have a very, very quality, safe position that potentially can actually somewhat squeeze, to that 15 plus upside. So I love it. I think it's great. I think those calls are going to do absolutely killer. Both the December and the June ones that we have targeted. And I think our shares are going to do absolutely killer as well. So a really, really nice position. SPY here starting to build a little bit of bearish structure at the top here. So that is kind of exactly what we're looking for. Now we're still looking for the 20 mile exit, which the 20 mile is currently at the 731.16. Okay, so if we do get our pull down to the 20 mile, that's going to be the put exit and the call entry. Yeah, for me, I don't even watch the VIX during the intraday. Um, for me, that really doesn't tell me a lot. Um, if I'm looking for a very, very hyper specific move, I'm watching the VVIX because, again, literally every single penny of upside means that a very big dealer has went out and bought insurance against their equities. Uh, Much different than the VIX where you can just have a bunch of retail buying VIX calls because they're afraid that the market's too high. When potentially we could be pushing up, a whole nother 5, 6, $7. So that's why I don't like watching the standard VIX in terms of the daily price action. For me, it's more so just, are we above that $20 range? If yes, then there's a lot of, VIX calls within circulation, which means that there's a decent amount of puts within the market. If we're below that range, then that's telling us that really there's not a whole ton of puts within the market right now, and that the upside is kind of really open and available. So sorry, I sound like I'm shaking. I'm freezing in my house right now. It's got to be like 60 in here. So everybody should be on board of what the goal of the day is. We use our 5-minute 20 mile here for both the exit on the puts and further entries on the calls, and everybody should be having an absolutely killer day. So, um, yeah, thank you all for watching. Again, my schedule is going to be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. I will be streaming tomorrow morning, so I look forward to seeing you all there. You do know any traders that, you know, day trade and would like to listen to me ramble? Feel free to share my stream, but no worries if you don't. So, um, one thing I am looking at here though, I just wanted to really quick identify this inverse cup. This inverse cup here will take us to that 20 mile. So it's almost certain we get our 20 mile move any second here. So start preparing to get ready to sell those puts, get ready to enter those calls. And with that said, I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day and I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Take care, everybody.